So the new WTC cycle has started and test matches have started coming thick and fast. New cycle for 2025 to 27 started with Sri Lanka playing against their first test against Bangladesh, followed by England playing against India, and yesterday it was turn of West Indies to play their first test against Australia at the iconic Kensington Oval, Bridgetown, Barbados. Kensington Oval, Barbados is known to be a really bowler's paradise in the 70s and 80s, and yesterday that pitch again resembled that kind of a pitch. It had plenty of juice, it had plenty of assistance for seamers, and on that pitch it was interesting to see Australia winning the toss and choosing to bat first. More so because Australia has a very peculiar and a very depleted batting lineup, one can say, coming into this test. Partly it was forced upon them because, for example, Steve Smith's finger injury meant he was not available, so that created a gaping hole in the Australian batting lineup. But subsequently, they have also decided to catch the bull by the horn, take a bold decision of dropping Labuschagne even without Steve Smith, because they felt Labuschagne has been struggling with his form and there was no point in trying to put more pressure on him by keeping him exposed in the test arena. So they decided to give him a much needed break so that he could rejuvenate himself and come back as a better player and keep on performing the way he used to perform at his peak. In the light of all these two changes, there was also more pressure on Australia because Australia now had to find an opener, because since Labuschagne was not there, so they had to find a partner for Usman Khawaja, and they didn't have too many options left in their coffers, so they had to go back to 19-year-old prodigy Sam Constance, and they hope that maybe this is the chance Constance would try to cash in and become an assured opener for them in the future, because let's not forget Australia has challenge and worry for two openers, because Khawaja is at the fag end of his career, so it's a matter of few months he may also be bidding farewell to test cricket. So in that time Australia should have two established or great openers ready to carry the legacy of Hayden, Langer and Warner. So right now they are struggling to even get one. So for that reason they were actually trying to address that issue and gave Sam Constance an opener slot. And also they decided to stick to Cameron Green as number 3, and because they see huge potential and promise in Cameron Green, they have a lot of confidence in his talent and they want to invest in him as a long-term number 3. So yes, that was also a bold decision, considering Cameron Green had a forgettable outing in the WTC final. So that meant when they are going to bat on a spicy, juicy pitch at Kensington Oval, they had some gaping holes in their batting. Their opening slot was not stable and compact. Their number 3 was an experiment, and then there was no Labuschagne or Steve Smith to give stability if there was some chaos happening in the top. And then they would be only depending on stroke players like Travis Head and maybe Carey, and then tailenders to give them some kind of a respectability. So they desperately needed the top order to click, or Khawaja to click, or at least have a decent partnership, but it was not going to be, because West Indies has found a bowler in Shamar Joseph who has something going for him when he plays against Australia. The last time he played against Australia, it was at Brisbane 3 years back, and he came up with a dream spell with a broken toe to take 7 for 68 to single-handedly win a test for West Indies against Australia after 27 years there, and also ensured the series to be tied. So yesterday he started from that place where he had ended at Brisbane. He looked exactly the same notoriously wicked bowler who was creating havoc in every Australian batting lineup, in the batting lineup, and Khawaja and Constance were looking like bunnies against him. And Khawaja was lucky that his catches were dropped by Brandon King, the debutant player for West Indies, but Sam Constance was not as lucky. So very soon Sam Constance got out, followed by Cameron Green, who failed to repay the faith that Australia had in him as a number 3. And when Josh Inglis played a rash stroke to lose his wicket, Australia were reduced to 22 for 3, and West Indies were not even through with the first hour of bowling, so that was real pressure on Australian batting. But then ultimately when Head came in and Khawaja had managed to then stabilize himself and composed himself, then they started building up a partnership, and then they crossed 100 and it looked Australia might have found a way to weather the storm, and maybe they would be able to reach a total of 270, 275, which would actually be a formidable total on that juicy pitch. But then it was not going to be, because Shamar Joseph was still bowling with a lot of fire, and then he was getting great support from Jaden Seals, who came in with a dream second spell, third spell to really break the back of Australian batting, and finally Australia were skittled out for 180. Everybody knew it was a below par total for a great team like Australia, but people were also aware, even the loyal fans of West Indies who were watching the game would have known that the pitch had enough juice for the best bowling lineup in the world to extract something out of it. So when you have Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood in your ranks on a seam-friendly pitch, you could never be safe. And West Indies has one of the most ordinary test batting lineup in contemporary cricket. So it was known that they would be tested, and yes, they were tested by Stark in the beginning, followed by Cummins and Hazelwood. So initially Stark created havoc, and they took the wickets of both the openers, Campbell as well as Braithwaite, to reduce Australia to 2 down for almost nothing. And then just when it looked that Casey and Brandon King, the debutant, would be able to somehow manage a stitch around a decent partnership and at least reach the first day in a decent position or a safe position to give them some hope in the second day to actually build on that innings, then Cummins came in to broke that partnership. He took Casey's wicket, and then immediately Hazelwood followed by taking Verakan's wicket for a duck, and from 50 for 2, West Indies were reduced to 53 for 4, and ultimately they ended with 57 for 4. Now they are in a precarious position. They are no longer even on an average position. They are in a precarious position because they have lost 4 frontline batters. Yes, Brandon King has scored a few runs and he is still there, and he is being supported by their captain, that is Rustin Chase, and also their wicketkeeper Shai Hope, who is a decent batter, is going to come next. But after that, there is hardly any batting left in West Indies. So then West Indies would be knowing that at 57 for 4, today 180 looks far off, miles off, and right now their only efforts would be to weather the storm in the first session, because now Australian bowlers have tested blood. They would be fresh, they would be rejuvenated in the second day, and Cummins, Stark and Hazelwood would make life miserable for King and Chase. So the first task for Chase and King would be to at least weather the storm, try to stay and survive for some time, then hopefully stitch around a decent partnership and try their best to first match the Australian total. Then they can hope for any slender lead, because they know that they have to bat 4th and chase down a total that would be set by Australia. And if they can't match Australia's total in the first innings, they would be almost out of the game, because you don't expect a mighty team like Australia to do the same harakiri or mistakes in the second time batting as they did in the first time. So they would definitely put up a better show, and that would put real pressure on West Indies batting in the 4th innings against a world-class bowling of Australia. So West Indies real test in the first innings, in the second day, in the first session. If they can manage to weather it, they can actually be in the contest. Otherwise they would be out of the contest very soon. So an interesting day is coming up in the second day. We can't wait to watch it. So we'll be watching it and we'll be following it now closely. Thank you.